Welcome to this explainer. Today, we're diving into what is honestly one of the most profound texts in all of human history. The Book of Job is a masterpiece of ancient wisdom literature that has just absolutely captivated philosophers and theologians for thousands of years. But we're going to be looking at it through a very specific lens right now. We're breaking down its structure not just as some old piece of poetry, but as a deeply complex, cosmic courtroom drama.
Right off the bat, this is the central mystery driving the text. And it's not set up as some simple moral fable, but rather as a thrilling legal drama where the very laws of the universe are being put on trial. I mean, it's the ultimate question of human existence, isn't it? If there is a just and powerful creator, why in the world does unimaginable pain happen to completely good people? The Book of Job tackles this head on, and the way it goes about answering it, or, well, kind of subverting our expectations of an answer, is nothing short of brilliant.
So let's set the stage. Act 1, The Wager in Heaven.
Meet our protagonist, Job. Now, Job is a blameless, incredibly wealthy man with what looks like a totally flawless life. He fears God, he shuns evil, and he has this massive family and estate. But the story frames his impending tragedy with some absolutely incredible dramatic irony. You see, we, the audience, are given this backstage pass to a cosmic wager happening up in the heavenly court between God and the adversary, Satan. Satan argues that Job is really only good because God protects him. He says take away the rewards and Job will literally curse God to his face. But down on earth, Job knows absolutely nothing about this wager. He is completely in the dark, eventually left scraping painful sores with broken pottery and a literal pile of ashes.
And the text brilliantly illustrates the sheer velocity of his tragedy here. Once God's protection is lifted, the devastation is pretty much instantaneous. Messenger after messenger arrives in rapid succession. It's just one hit after another. In a single day, raiders steal his oxen, fire consumes his sheep, enemies take his camels, and then a mighty wind collapses a house, killing all 10 of Job's children. In just the blink of an eye, he loses the whole shebang, his wealth, his servants, and his entire family.
That brings us to Act 2, the retribution principle. Okay, so Job's 3 friends, Eliphaz, Bildad, and Zophar, arrive to comfort him. But their initial silence very quickly shatters into a relentless, multi-chapter philosophical prosecution. To actually decode their intense debate, we really have to grasp their foundational worldview, which is the retribution principle. Basically, they believe the universe operates exactly like a cosmic vending machine. You put in good deeds, you get out blessings. You put in bad deeds, you get out suffering. In their minds, there are literally no exceptions to this rule.
So, you can see the total deadlock here. Because the friends believe in strict retribution, they're acting as the prosecution, basically mathematically deducing his guilt. They look at Job's immense suffering and logically conclude, well, he must be hiding some incredibly dark, secret sin. But then on the other side, you have Job's reality. He knows he's innocent. The text flat out told us in chapter 1 that he is blameless. His lived reality just completely breaks their tidy theological formula.
But his friends just keep bombarding him with this brutal logic, like Eliphaz here, who argues, as I have observed, those who plow evil and those who sow trouble reap it. They are absolutely convinced that God does not pervert justice, so the only possible conclusion they can reach is that Job is a sinner who needs to repent. They urge him to just confess, but Job absolutely refuses to lie just to make their theology work.
Moving into Act 2 continued, Job demands a trial. In response to all these relentless accusations, Job aggressively shifts gears. He goes from just mourning his losses to fierce legal defiance. Acting as his own defense attorney, he demands his day in court. Notice he uses literal lawsuit language, desiring to argue his case and be vindicated. Job wants to subpoena the ultimate judge, and he's completely willing to risk his own life to demand answers for his suffering and find out exactly what charges have been brought against him.
But right before the climax, the trial gets interrupted. A younger man named Elihu enters the scene, basically acting like an amicus brief, a friend of the court offering an outside perspective. And Elihu is just angry at everyone. He's mad at Job for being so self-righteous, and he's mad at the older friends for completely failing to prove Job wrong. Elihu offers this slightly more nuanced view, suggesting that suffering isn't always strictly punitive for past sins. He proposes that sometimes God might actually use it as a warning to prevent future pride or to course-correct a person's path.
Now for the climax. Act 3, The Voice in the Storm.
Suddenly, the ultimate judge arrives. But he doesn't just walk in quietly. God speaks directly to Job out of a massive whirlwind. And what's really fascinating here is what God doesn't do. He doesn't explain the cosmic wager. He doesn't explain the mechanics of Job's suffering at all. Instead, God unleashes this rapid-fire rhetorical barrage, kicking things off with a massive question. Where were you when I laid the earth's foundation? He takes Job on an overwhelming, frankly dizzying tour of the universe's incredibly wild design.
The judge just continually challenges the plaintiff on the raw mechanics of the cosmos. He asks, "Have you entered the storehouses of the snow?" He grills Job about the constellations, the rain and the desolate wastelands, the mysterious instincts of wild mountain goats. God is essentially leaning in and asking, "Do you actually possess the vantage point to understand how I run the entire universe?"
And the climax of this whirlwind tour comes when God brings up the beasts. He asks, can you pull in the Leviathan with a fishhook or tie down his tongue with a rope? The sheer, unfathomable scale of these questions brilliantly forces Job to finally realize the infinite gap between limited human understanding and absolute divine sovereignty. Job thought the universe was solely about human morality, but God pulls back the curtain on a cosmos that is infinitely larger and vastly wilder than Job ever imagined. Just consider the two great beasts God describes here, the behemoth and the Leviathan. These aren't pets, they are untamable, chaotic creatures of just immense power. By juxtaposing our tiny human smallness with these terrifying, majestic beasts, the text illustrates a really profound point. The world is complex, it's majestic, and crucially, it is not built solely around human concepts of strict retribution. God clearly values these wild, chaotic parts of creation, even if they seem dangerous or totally incomprehensible to us.
Which leads us to the resolution. Act 3 continued. Restoration and acceptance. So, completely overwhelmed by the majesty of the storm and the sheer scale of the cosmos, Job drops his lawsuit. He admits he spoke of things way too wonderful for him to actually understand, and he repents in dust and ashes. And that brings us to the crucial final verdict, which has a massive twist. God turns to Eliphaz and says, "I am angry with you and your two friends, because you have not spoken of me what is right, as my servant Job has." God actually rebukes the friends. He vindicates Job's honest, painful search for the truth, while completely condemning the friends' attempts to put the divine into a neat, predictable little box.
The narrative then resolves with God restoring Job's fortunes. He asks Job to pray for those friends of his, and then God gifts Job exactly double the immense wealth he started the story with. We're talking 14,000 sheep, 6,000 camels, plus all the oxen and donkeys. On top of that, he is blessed with 10 more children and lives out his days long enough to see his descendants all the way to the 4th generation.
So what do we take away from this? We ultimately leave this ancient cosmic courtroom without a neat, bow-tied answer to the problem of suffering. The book of Job doesn't give us a simple mathematical equation to solve human pain. Instead, it leaves us with a profound, lingering challenge. Can we accept that the universe's design is simply far too vast to fit our tiny human formulas for justice? It's a question that asks us to surrender our desire for absolute control and instead find peace in a mystery far bigger than ourselves. Thanks so much for joining me on this explainer. Keep asking those big questions, and I'll catch you next time.